All right, guys, how you doing? Let me get settled in here. Today I want to talk about something that's pretty important to me. Let me get this light on. And I've talked about it before. It's so important. I've got notes. Talked a little bit about it before, but I want to talk about it again because it's coming up again in my collective group, and that is how psychology, spirituality, and anything can be, I use the term perverted because it means to be corrupted or distorted, changed from its original intention. Anything can be perverted, and not just when used by the bad people. Really great systems that are otherwise as perfect as they could be can be perverted by well-intentioned people. And I was just talking about this the other day on Instagram. I knew I wanted to talk about it here. So here we are. First of all, welcome back to another video. I'm Ann Blackwood, your Silicon Valley Sage Sister, here to bring consciousness to the forefront of your daily life to make life a little kinder and simpler. So the topic of cults has come back up in my group of people, and the last time this came up was because I watched the first documentary that I believe came out on Stars as well as Amazon about the NXIVM cult. And it was Indy Oxenberg's version. Now, I get very interested in watching how things like this work because it is my mission, as I said at the end of my last video, to never use the psychology that I've learned, never use my understanding of psychology, never use my understanding of self-help tools, never use my understanding of spirituality to manipulate people. This is very important to me. My reason for wanting to teach people everything that I know is because I want to be able to, and this started out specifically with children, because I was a child at the time. But I want to be able to teach everybody the tools that they need before they need them, so that they can end the cycles of suffering in their life. And so anything that creates more suffering in people's lives, I'm sensitive to. So I more recently have watched the two other mini-series that came out about the NXIVM cult. One was a dramatization on Netflix of India's story, and one was on HBO Max, and was from the perspective of everybody else who was involved. Her mother was in it for part of it, and then everybody else who defected. And watching the footage that they have, it's a little painful to watch, because a lot of what Keith Raniere used to manipulate people, I recognize in my own teachings. I recognize in the teachings of my teachers. But the difference is, and this is what I want to talk about, the difference is they started with really great psychology, and other cults and other systems like this, like Scientology, do this too. where they start with real psychology and spiritual technology that helps people, and then they start integrating their own ideology and their own language. And then eventually the psychology and the spiritual technology gets taken out, and then all you're left with is what he even called technology. Excuse me, I'm a little stuffy this morning. So it's especially interesting to watch with the NXIVM miniseries, because of how much of their tools and teachings were actually really great teachings. That's why they were able to get really well-intentioned, good-hearted people into their space to lead it for them. Because if it wasn't for those people, it wouldn't have taken off the way it did. It's because of the amazing people in these documentaries who eventually defected that it was able to take off the way it did, truly. It was able to get as many people in as it did. Because if there's one thing I've learned about building a following, it's that the leader's great and all, the leader's necessary, but it's those first few followers that show other people how to follow. And that's what's required to make a bigger and bigger and bigger group. It's not the leader with their first few followers, it's those followers showing everybody else how to follow the leader. That makes a group become a bigger and bigger and bigger group. And what they do is they take, especially in this case, but even in others that I've seen, things like neuro-linguistic programming. I'm slowly but surely listening to the Dark Psychology book. I forget who it's by. But neuro-linguistic programming is an amazing tool to manipulate people. Which is why I'm always learning these things, so that I can be conscious that I'm not doing them. Because we can accidentally do these things to each other when we don't know them. And this is what I wanted to get across. First and foremost, as I started to say in the beginning, the worst intentioned people who know how the system works can pervert what happens within the system. The best intentioned people who don't know how the system works can pervert what's happening within the system. So we can't just blame the bad people. And I'm not saying we should ever blame the victims, but this is a great example of why it is so important to be informed on anything you're possibly going to be interested in. We will not ever be able to be informed on everything all the time. I am never suggesting that anybody is ever going to be able to become an encyclopedia on everything all the time. That's one of the reasons why I like the relationship I have with my significant other so much. Because between the two of us, we make a pretty awesome encyclopedia of a lot of things. So anytime I don't know something, I can go to him. Anytime he doesn't know something, he'll come to me. And we are constantly asking each other questions about things. I can think of, gosh, what was it? I was pretty sure I knew what NATO was. That was the last one. But just a few weeks ago, when they were talking about Ukraine, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I know what NATO is. I'm pretty sure I have a firm grasp of this. But rather than looking it up, I know he knows for sure what NATO is. And so I'm going to go ask him to explain NATO to me. Because I did. I had a basic understanding of what NATO was. I found out, but, you know, I didn't totally understand it. And eventually, you know, between the two of us, we started looking things up to get deeper into it. But this is what I'm talking about. This is what we all need to do as we get interested in things. You never want to take somebody else's singular word for anything. I love my significant other. He loves me, but we don't even take each other's word as gospel, period. You know, we will trust each other. It's not that we don't have trust in each other, but the human mind is fallible on so many levels, especially when it comes to our memory, especially when it comes to our understanding of things, because we don't realize it's like a bad game of telephone, where over time, someone who started with the right information passes it down, that person passes it down, you know, and eventually you have a distorted view of what the original thing was. A great example of this is pretty much, I would say most of us at this point have heard about the, I'm blanking on a word here, the stages of grief. I bet you've heard, if you're watching this, about the stages of grief. But I'm here to tell you, if you haven't heard me say it before, the stages of grief aren't for just anybody. They're not the stages of grief. They are the stages that someone goes through in the grieving process of knowing they're going to die. Did you know that? This is a great example of this. The stages of grief that everybody thinks applies to just anybody grieving, that doesn't, comes from a study done on people coming to terms with the fact that they were dying. And that's just one little example. So, let's get into my notes here. As I said, what they do is they take really, really great tools that work to get you in. Because if they weren't providing results, no one would ever join. So they've got to start with the stuff that works. But like I said, then they start blending. And they blend from the beginning. But they do it with vocabulary. And this is part of how this came up recently, was because I was listening to my human design teacher talk about how there were a few people in her life who thought that human design was a cult because they had their own vocabulary. But the difference is, it's not a problem to have your own vocabulary to understanding things. Like, you'll take a word that means something, and sure, it means that even in what you're talking about, but it's got like just a little bit more of a specific meaning. As where cults start using words like suppressive people. That was one that I noticed NXIVM and Scientology both use. Suppressive people. And they use this term to label anybody who's not actively on their side. And so now you start having language, and that creates an insular group. That creates a really cohesive group, because they've taken the real stuff that works, peppered it with their language, so that as they start introducing their language, it doesn't seem so odd, and then they can start slipping out the real stuff that works and just being left with their stuff, and no one's the wiser, because it's such a smooth transition. So they twist things. They start twisting things to slowly but surely get you used to things that you would otherwise notice as a red flag. For instance, the idea that not all resistance is bad. when we can understand that this kind of thing can be used against us to make us think that something's wrong with our intuition, that's how we get in trouble. Because they'll do things like start teaching you that you being resistant to things, which is something that I talk about. You know, you don't want to be resistant to things. You don't want to fear things. That's another way that they twist things. But they do it in a very different way, because I want people to recognize where they're resistant to things and then ask themselves, should I be resistant to this? I want to teach people to recognize their fears and ask themselves, should I really be afraid of this? I want to teach people how to learn to trust themselves, not learn to trust me. Trusting me is pretty key in being able for me to teach these things. But the difference is ultimately, I'm not trying to get someone to be my student for life. I'm trying to teach them for a short period of time how to trust themselves, and then let them loose on the world with that trust in themselves to be able to be their own teacher for as long as they ever want to be their own teacher and not have to rely on anyone else. So these things like not being resistant, not being fearful, they teach you, you know, to get through your resistances, to get through your fears, just like I would. But then they turn around and use it for things that are abusive. They'll turn around and be like, well, you feel like this is misogynistic? You feel like this is harmful? You need to get over that. Because that's you being resistant. And they've started sprinkling in all this other language and psychology that over time, because the things that you've been taught by this person or these people have worked in the past, you think, I really need to listen to these people. Because they've changed my life this much, they must be right. And you start ignoring your intuition, the thing that I'm trying to teach everybody to tap into. You start ignoring all of the somatic feedback, the signs in your body that are screaming at you, this is wrong. I am unhealthy. Because your mind has an established pattern of them being right in the past, even though they're wrong now. And this is how they all get you. This is how they all get you. They do this with pain. They do this with switching the contexts of things to the point where you start being willing to harm yourself and others because they were right in the past and it helped, so this must help too. And this is where I try to remind people that this is why we want to learn the difference between pain, true pain, and what we call growing pains, which is tension. Because there is good pain. And I was watching, well, there are such things as good tensions that are the baser levels of pain. Once you get up into pain at a 10 rather than an itch or a mild tension at a 1 or a 3, that's where we start seeing the difference. But the problem is people like Keith Raniere can try to teach you what I try to teach people, but twist it. Where he'll start associating it to all pain. All pain, all pain, all pain. Because especially emotional pain becomes very relative to what you've experienced in your life. So someone who's experienced a lot of crap could experience a very, very bad thing and have it be a painful but mildly painful experience. And then someone who's never experienced anything else in their life could experience that exact same thing, and it could be the worst thing that's ever happened to them in the world. And so to them, that's going to be way worse than the person who's experienced other bad things along the way. So this is why I teach people to start recognizing the difference between what we call our growing pains and actual pain. Because growing pains are tensions, but they're not the most painful thing, because it's a healthy tension rather than a painful, unhealthy pain. And you can learn to distinguish the difference. But people can use that against others to be like, well, this is just a growing pain. They start classifying the unhealthy pains as growing pains. And this is where that dance that I talk about comes in, where everything's a balance, and understanding the nuances understanding the nuances are important. And ultimately, being able to listen to yourself is important. The moment you start putting someone up on a pedestal as a guru, that is a warning sign you need to get out. You can look up to people, you can admire people all day long. But if you're starting to worship that person, that's a red flag, something wrong. Either within yourself or within what they're doing is going on. All right, so I want to leave you guys today with some ways in which you can start to recognize that somebody's trying to manipulate you. And the first way you can start to tell, or one of the ways in which you can tell something is trying to manipulate you, is because it's telling you it's the only way. It's the only way. There's no other way. As where people who aren't trying to manipulate you tell you things like, take what you need, leave the rest. If I'm not for you, no worries. I hope you find what you're looking for. And you will be able to tell if that person is honest or not. Because I've had teachers who say, I can't wait for you to graduate me, but I just don't want to hear about it. Take what you need and leave the rest. But they say it in a way in which is like annoyed by the idea that you wouldn't just listen to them or could possibly ever need something other than them. If someone is telling you this is the only way and there's no other way, which I have spent a very, very long time trying to find all the ways and all the best ways, so that I have an actual toolbox at my disposal to help people, rather than just one way to help each person with any particular thing. Because I've had people tell me this is the only way, and then come out on the other side and realize they were full of crap. This was the way that worked for them. This was maybe the only way that worked for them. This is maybe the only way that works for some people, but it's not the only way. Because we are not as complicated as people think we are. We are also more unique than some people think we are. And that's another balance of life, is that we're not snowflakes. We're not these unique, intricate, individual, no one else like us snowflakes. We're not. I say we're ice cubes. But that's not to say that there isn't unique things about us. There aren't unique things about us. And we all have a very awesome mission. And we're all meant to be here, and we all need to be here, and we're all important. Just because you're not unique doesn't mean you aren't important. And I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that. Just because you're not unique doesn't mean you're not important. And I think that's where people get caught up with this, is they think that they need to be unique to be important. That's not true. And I'll give you an example. When you buy something that you have to put together yourself, or you even buy something that's put together already, how many of those same nails go into that? Whatever it is. Let's say it's a chair or a table. Each nail is almost identical. It might have its own little flaws, but for the most part, each nail is identical. It has to be. When it comes to good construction. But each nail is important, because the moment you take just one of them out, or a screw, each nail or each screw is important, because when you start taking them out, what happens? It falls apart. Just because you're not unique does not mean you're not important. So, number one, if they're telling you it's the only way, recognize that, yeah, there aren't going to be a bazillion ways to do anything. They're probably going to be like 5 to 10 in my experience. Everything comes down to 5 to 10 ways as you start generalizing them down. But what a great teacher is going to do is going to tell you, if I'm not for you, how can I help you find someone who is? Or I hope you find someone who is for you. And of all my teachings, whatever it may be, take what you need and leave the rest. If you do find something awesome in my teachings, I'm not expecting you to stick with me forever. I would love for you to find value in what I do for as long as you do. But if at some point you outgrow me, because that's a teacher's mission, is to teach you faster what they learned in a longer period of time. That's the whole point of a teacher. So a good teacher should want you to surpass them in their knowledge and way of being. Number 2, comes down to something I said earlier, which is the trust factor. Which what I just kind of said leads into this. A good teacher is going to teach you how to rely on yourself with their system, not rely on the system. I'll say that again. A good teacher, a good system, is going to start teaching you how to rely on yourself with the system, not rely on the system. So eventually, you should be able to be so trusting in yourself, be so knowledgeable of yourself, that if you don't want help, you could figure it out on your own. Now, as I remind people, sometimes it's better to get help. Sometimes it is absolutely better to get help because it'll make it faster or easier, or because for whatever reason, doing it on your own would take so long that right now it looks like you can't do it on your own. Even though there's pretty much nothing that I can think of that someone can't do on their own with the right amount of time. But if you find yourself in a position where, because of the fact that we live in a place with time-space constraints, if it looks like you can't do it on your own, that's a good time to ask for help. But you should also be able to recognize when you're not supposed to do something because you can't do it on your own, versus knowing when to do something by gathering as many people as possible because you can't do it on your own. It should be teaching you those things, those differences, so that you can rely on yourself and your trust in yourself, not your trust in something else. And that's not to say that those tools that you must rely on in the interim to get there aren't important. There are certain teachings and certain things where you will rely on it for a time. But eventually, just like over time you could do anything on your own, there's nothing you can't do on your own. Eventually, over time, the more and more you use the tool, even if it looks like you can't do it without it now, it should be teaching you. It should be programming your neural pathways in a way in which eventually, when you drop the tool, you can do it on your own without it. So, if it's teaching you to trust them over yourself, bad news. Bad news bears. And the problem with that one is that sometimes they can disguise themselves as teaching you how to trust yourself, even though technically what they're doing is teaching you how to rely on them. So being aware of anything, and it's funny that I say this because I am a part of dōTERRA, and we've chosen a multi-level marketing strategy for dōTERRA, but for completely different reasons. And so recognizing when something has a structure of a hierarchy, because everything does, to be fair, everything does. But to recognize that everything has a structure of everything is structured in hierarchies. The difference becomes when that particular thing or group feels like if you were to take one little piece out, the whole Jenga set would fall, that's a warning sign. When they tell you that things must be a certain way, and yet they're clamoring for you to come join them. For instance, an example of a place where they tell you you must do things a certain way, but turn lots of people away, is martial arts studios. When you learn the discipline of a martial art, especially the best of the best that are the most disciplined, they don't just take anybody. You often have to show persistence of asking multiple times before they will even let you in. As where a system like Nixium will take anybody who's willing to pay them money. You don't have money, that's fine. We have a system where you can start working it off. And then you go into debt. That's one of the things I noticed about dōTERRA, is they found a way to just have all the product on their end, so that if you want to be a wellness advocate for dōTERRA, if you love dōTERRA so much that you want to sell dōTERRA products, there's no investment. You don't have to take on product like most people do. All you have to do is have access to a computer. That's it. And they will do the rest. Because they don't force you to make an investment in them. Now, most of us have been using the product for so long before we even become wellness advocates that we've kind of already taken on a wealth of inventory just for our own personal use that we were already sharing with others, which is why the multi-level marketing strategy works so well for dōTERRA. Because those of us who find dōTERRA, you know, we're obsessed. We're obsessed. We're obsessed with dōTERRA because we are obsessed with having clean, green, sustainable products in our home and not having synthetic chemical-based products in our home. And so we become obsessed with dōTERRA because we were already obsessed with that, and we found the best of the best. I mean, I could talk your ear off when it comes to dōTERRA. Which is why I decided to become an official wellness advocate. Originally, with dōTERRA, I decided that I wasn't going to become a wellness advocate. I was just going to take all of my clients who I thought would benefit from dōTERRA and have them link up with my wellness advocate. But I realized that what started happening was because they had to get to know a new person. They weren't taking the offer. Because we have this thing that we do called know, like, and trust. And it is our defense against things like cults and scams. And thank the gods we have it. Because it saves us from a lot of heartache. The fact that most of us, in order to get involved in something, have to know it, like it, trust it. Because you can know something and not like it. You can know something and not trust it. So I was just watching my video back in the editing process, and I want to mention this too, because it is our know, like, and trust factor that can get preyed upon, even though most of the time it is our defense. Most of us are not what we call early adopters. Like I said, most people aren't the people who follow the leader in the beginning. Most people follow the followers to the leader. And this is how our like factor gets preyed upon. Because what happens is the leader teaches the followers, because the leader knows themselves, how to manipulate people by being a chameleon with likes, with what we like. So they're going to tell you that they like what you like. They're going to figure out what you like and figure that way in. And then from there, they manipulate you into liking them for just long enough to get to know them. And then you think that you trust them. Because we will follow the crowd. There's been studies, I've talked about it, where you can have a whole group of people saying the wrong thing and you know it's the wrong thing. But because the group's saying it, you will say it anyway, even though within you, you know it's the wrong thing. So we have to be careful, because they will take one little thing that you like, even though the rest of the things you know are wrong, and they will get you in. And then they will prey upon our innate willingness to go along with a group, even if we know what that group is doing is wrong. So, the next time you find yourself in a position where something doesn't quite feel right, and this might be with an individual person, this might be with a group of people, this might be in a sales situation, it might be in a very casual situation. The next time you find yourself uncomfortable, I want you to ask yourself, why do I feel uncomfortable? What about this makes me feel uncomfortable? And if you can't answer that question, or if you're not confident in the answer that you come up with, walk away. Because anything that is worth your time will let you come back. Anything that's worth your time will let you come back. And not just let you come back, but let you come back at the price that they first offered you. In my experience, the reason why people can charge a lower price for a small period of time is because that's what it's actually worth. And anything inflated that they tell you it's worth, that's got a cross through it, that's got a slash through it, that's got a line through it, and they say, just for today, you get 50% off, or whatever it might be, so that you can only get it for this. That's how you know that is what the value of it actually is. Because that is what people are actually buying it at. And that people aren't often buying it, if at all, at that inflated price. Seriously. And people will use that pressure of just for today, just for today, just for today, because we respond to it. But if there's one thing that I've learned about what I need and what I want and what I'm worth, it's that if I truly want something, if I truly need something, sure, it might be nice to get it at that cheaper price, but I deserve it at any price. And so if that means coming back and paying that extra 50%, it's going to be worth it. It's actually going to be worth it. But in my experience, people don't discount their stuff 50% if at the 100% price you're really getting what it's worth. That's why I don't discount my prices. That's why I don't massively inflate my prices. I have a system that I use where I figured out, based on the commitment that people make, a very small range of difference. And so as you go from each of my session packages, if you make a commitment of 4 sessions, you get me at my normal hourly rate. If you make a commitment to 13 sessions, you get a little bit of a discount because I am honoring your commitment. And the fact that that brings the price up to a much larger number at a time. And I want to honor other people's commitment when it comes to spending some actual time and money on themselves. But you will never find my prices slashed at 50%. I think from top to... Actually, I don't even know anymore. I don't even think it... I think it comes to like 20% from top to bottom. And that's because at the best rate for my 24 session package, I give away a free mountain bound book as well. So yeah, this has been a long one, but it's important. It's important to be able to recognize when you are being manipulated. So doing your research, not trusting what you're given at face value the first time. Even if you look it up and go, oh yeah, that is what I see. Which, to be fair, honestly, at this point, when we look things up on the internet with the normal search engines that we look them up with, you don't get the most accurate answer. You get the most popular answer. So be aware of that, because the most popular answer isn't always the most accurate answer. Yeah. Thank you for joining me, guys, for this video. I kind of just sat down with my idea and went with it. The world can be an intimidating place, but it doesn't have to be. And there are a lot of amazing things that bad people who know how they work use for bad, and good people who don't know how they work end up accidentally using for bad. And we have to be aware of both. Because we can have really amazing systems and tools and technologies that could really help us get used in all the wrong ways when we don't inform ourselves. And like I started this with, I don't expect anybody to become an encyclopedia of everything overnight. But as something interests you, give it just a moment of your time. Just a small moment of your time to start learning about it. That is that is how people become the encyclopedias that they are when you do find a person who is knowledgeable on so many different things. Thank you guys for joining me for another video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out your links in the links in the description. I'm not going to go on and on about them because this video is already pretty long. But Patreon, where I have journal exercises, guided meditations, one-off videos, courses, mini-series, you name it. I've got all sorts of amazing things going on over on Patreon. That is also how, with my Enlightening tier, you can work with me once a month. If you're not ready to dive into a session package, I also have my free clarity call, my email, if you have any questions, or if you know you're ready to heal, grow, and expand, and are really ready to end your cycles of suffering, and you know you're ready, you can just sign up for one of my session packages that I was talking about. That commits you to a certain number of sessions, and then we personalize the rest to you. I also have my link for doTERRA and doTERRA Witches. doTERRA is amazing. It's your one-stop shop for taking all of those synthetic chemicals, getting rid of them, and replacing them with the best plant-based, cleanest, greenest, sustainable plant-based products and plant medicine. And doTERRA Witches is a group that I am a part of. We are an amazing group who we do little gatherings for the full and new moon. We also do classes on doTERRA and doTERRA products and all sorts of other things in the description there to check out. So if you're enjoying my content here, don't forget to check out the links in the description. And as always, may the energies you serve you well, and let's keep making our way through.